Hello everybody and welcome back to the HLTCO YouTube channel. It's not often that I have discussed Crystal Palace on this YouTube channel. It tends to be a place where I pick over things that are going on in football generally rather than indulging my passion for Crystal Palace Football Club. But thanks to the last few weeks, we've become something of a hot topic when it comes to general football discourse. And with that in mind, I just wanted to record a video today about Oliver Glasner and the supposed new manager bounce that he has presided over during his time in SE25, because for me, the term new manager bounce is simply incorrect when it comes to the impact that the Austrian has had on Crystal Palace Football Club. I think it's very easy as a neutral to sort of, from a zoomed out point of view, I guess, look at it and say, you know, a new manager's gone in there, he's refreshed the squad, Roy Hodgson's tactics weren't working, he's come in, there's fresh impetus, and all of a sudden this purple patch of form that Crystal Palace find ourselves in is all down to the honeymoon period. But if you actually peel back the layers of the figurative onion, it's quite clear to me, and I dare say pretty much every Crystal Palace fan that lives and dies with our results from week to week, that this is not a new manager bounce. This is very much the coming to fruition of a tactical identity that I feel has long-term potential rolling into next season and potentially the campaign after that. Now, you might be watching this and think, you know, he's getting a bit carried away. He's a Crystal Palace fan. They're unbeaten in 6 with 5 wins. Of course, he's going to be waxing lyrical about their new boss. But if you enable me to speak to you for a few minutes here about the actual reasons for me making this video, I think you will probably come round to the same pattern of thinking as I do. If you go back to when Oliver Glasner first came in, he was in the stand with Steve Parish and the other directors at Goodison Park for a 1-1 draw at Goodison Park. That particular fixture against Everton was taken charge of by Paddy McCarthy, and we actually did go to a 5 at the back system for that fixture, which is something that Roy Hodgson hadn't done throughout his previous 2 spells as Palace boss. We got a 1-1 draw in that game. There was a degree of spirit there and a degree of effort, but it didn't really feel as though it was a free-flowing style of football. The first fixture we had under Oliver Glasner's guidance was at home to Burnley. We had a fantastic XG in that game. We looked really on top of it and, you know, completely blew them away at Selhurst Park, and everyone fairly, I think, at that point felt, you know, new manager bounce may well be a thing. But then immediately after that, we took on Luton Town. We were winning that game 1-0 going into the 96th or 97th minute. I've spoken about this a fair bit on my own podcast and in interviews that I've done about the impact that Oliver Glasner has had. In that particular game, we had a 1-goal advantage going into the final few minutes of stoppage time. We had 2 or 3 corners in that period of stoppage time, and rather than keeping the ball in the corner and trying to see out the final couple of minutes, we put the ball into the box. We didn't get our reward for it. They ended up scoring with pretty much the last kick of the game. We dropped 2 points at home, and there was a fair bit of frustration amongst the fan base as to, you know, the decision to not look after the ball and be safety first. But I think in many ways it was the first seed of what Oliver Glasner is trying to lay as a foundation, or was trying to lay as a foundation, for Crystal Palace FC as we find ourselves now on the 13th of May. Moving on from that, we of course had a defeat against Bournemouth, we had a defeat against Manchester City, we had a draw against Nottingham Forest. We in fact only won 1 of our first 6 games under Oliver Glasner, and that really is the basis for me recording this video for you today, because from my perspective, you look at a new manager bounce if you are going to put it into a pigeonholed box, and it's fair to suggest that the first 6 fixtures of a new manager's reign at a club would surely be the pure honeymoon period, the time when everything is going well, when the wheels are turning smoothly, and when there is nothing to really worry about. But that was not the case with Oliver Glasner, and the fact is that, and we'll get onto it in a minute, there was a training camp in Marbella which really did lay the foundations for the form that we are now seeing. But even after that particular training camp in Spain, we didn't see, in terms of results, an immediate pickup. This was very much a slow drip feed, and it's something which really, as we approach the end of the campaign now, has me positive alongside every other Crystal Palace fan for the season that lays in wait in 24-25. Thanks to a very much welcomed quirk of fate in the fixture list, Oliver Glasner was actually blessed with a gap between the 9th of March and the 30th of March without a Premier League fixture for Crystal Palace. There was an international break during that period. I think there was, I can't remember now, but an issue around the FA Cup and the scheduling of those games, and it meant that he had a 3-week spell without a competitive fixture to take charge of, and that enabled us to go to Marbella, as I have said in the previous section of this video, and really get down to the brass tacks of exactly what he and his coaching staff wanted from this Crystal Palace side, because he is on record himself as saying that he had never taken a job at mid-season before. He has previously been a manager at Lask, he has been a manager at Wolfsburg, he has been a manager at Eintracht Frankfurt. He has had success at all three of those clubs for a prolonged period of time, but he has never taken over the role of a manager mid-season, and that was something that he had a sense of trepidation about. He wasn't sure that the players would be able to or want to buy into his ideas mid-season because they are stuck in a certain way of playing. They have their own ideas. He wanted to be able to have a prolonged period of time to mould them on the training pitch, but he knew that he wasn't going to get that in the truest sense of the word coming in mid-season, parachuted in to replace Roy Hodgson. But thankfully for him, this 3-week gap enabled him to somewhat reset the clocks and go again. And even though immediately after that we had the draw with Nottingham Forest 1-1, we took the lead in that game at the City Ground, we were pegged back by Chris Wood. We then went into a home game against Manchester City, in which we scored after 1 or 2 minutes through Jean-Philippe Mateta, but ultimately, Manchester City, we all know the quality they possess. They blew us away in 10 or 15 minutes around the half-time, second half mark, and we weren't really able to get back into it from there. But I think in the Manchester City game specifically, we really saw the solid foundations of what Oliver Glasner was trying to do with this squad, the energy levels, the press, the attempt to meet them toe-to-toe. And of course, the run that we now find ourselves on began with a victory away at Liverpool. That was a 1-0 win at Anfield, when at that point, this is the revisionism that I sort of want to address really in this video, because at that point of the season, Liverpool and Jurgen Klopp were very much still a part of the title race. Yes, since then, they have fallen away dramatically. It is now a two-horse race between Arsenal and Manchester City at the top of the Premier League table. But when we went to Anfield, there was no sign of Liverpool slowing down in terms of their pursuit of that farewell Premier League trophy for Jurgen Klopp. And not only did we go there and win, kept a clean sheet and scored a fantastic team goal through Iberi Eze, there was a genuine press there. There was a fitness, there was a desire to win, to meet them head on. And the performance itself left me, and I dare say many other Crystal Palace fans, feeling really optimistic about the style of football that Oliver Glasner was starting to really be able to implement from week to week. And we have gone from strength to strength ever since that particular victory on Merseyside. Following on from that win over Liverpool, which of course felt so seismic for Crystal Palace's fans, our form has gone through the roof. We took on West Ham United in our next game at Selhurst Park. We scored 5 in that particular fixture, 4 of which came in the opening 30 minutes. Jean-Philippe Mateta's form has caught many people's attention over the last few weeks. I actually tweeted out on Sunday morning that he has scored 10 goals in 12 appearances under Oliver Glasner, having scored 11 in his previous 80 for Crystal Palace in the Premier League, spanning 3.5 years. Now, of course, you can highlight that a purple patch can occur for a striker, that anyone can go on these sort of runs out of nowhere. But if you look at the entire team, it really is a case of pretty much every player having brought their game up a level or two under Oliver Glasner. This is not just the headline of Elise, Eze and Mateta carrying this team. It's something that I will get onto in a little bit more detail in a moment. But just to continue taking you through the results that we've had, we went into a game at home to Newcastle United following that victory over West Ham, in which there was a sense of belief, of course, starting to be built. We had seen 2 consecutive victories, 5 goals scored against West Ham, that win at Anfield, which was so unexpected for many people, both partisan and neutral. But the game against Newcastle at Selhurst, for me, was a real litmus test of this new system that Oliver Glasner has put across to his players, because at that point, they had, I believe, 10 or 11 days rest coming down to South London. We were playing on 3 or 4 days rest. Yes, we were at home, but at that point, they were still in a good run of form. They felt confident going into it, Newcastle, and we absolutely blew them away. You can look at the scoreline and say, 2-0 at home, it's not as though you've completely taken them to the cleaners, but pretty much every Newcastle fan that I spoke to in the aftermath of that game, whether they were there, whether they watched it on TV, they felt as though they were not in it, that we looked a completely different animal to the one that they had expected, to the one that they had become used to when they go up against Crystal Palace from week to week over the last 10 or 11 years. And this is a pattern that has formed throughout this run. You have had neutrals explaining it away as a purple patch as this new manager bounce, but quite often, whenever Crystal Palace have won games in the Premier League, there's always a bone of contention. There's always the suggestion that we got somewhat lucky. But you look at the Liverpool game, you look at the West Ham game, you look at the Newcastle game, all three of those fixtures saw the opposition fans saying to me and every other Crystal Palace fan that I could possibly find that we were well worthy of the 3 points and that we looked a completely different animal under Oliver Glasner to what they had become used to in the Roy Hodgson era, or indeed throughout our stay in the Premier League since 2013. We then went into an away game at Fulham, in which once again we had only had a few days rest, having taken on Newcastle at Selhurst Park on the 24th of April. Fulham, by contrast, were on their own turf. They had had a full week to prepare for the game, and this isn't me making excuses, I am just explaining to you why potentially we didn't come away with all 3 points in that particular fixture. In the first 30 to 40 minutes, once again, I'm pretty sure you won't find a single Fulham fan who either was in attendance at the game or watched it via a stream who will suggest anything other than Crystal Palace being the better side. Undeniably, in the second half, we did look to tire somewhat. Our legs looked a little bit heavier. Fulham got themselves in front, and for me, it felt as though we would be on our way to the first defeat in quite some time. But thanks to a Jeffrey Schlupp wonder strike, we managed to get back on level pegging. If you haven't seen that goal yet, please do go and search it out, because even from a neutral point of view, I'm sure you will enjoy it from a purely technical perspective. But it really did keep the sense of momentum rolling. And of course, from there, we took on Manchester United at Selhurst Park. That in itself was a game which, for me, really drove home the project that is underway under Oliver Glasner, because we all know that Manchester United have got a myriad of problems. We all know they are the definition of a basket case at this point in time. You've got Sir Jim Ratcliffe, you've got Ineos, you've got all of the problems behind the scenes, the uncertainty about Erik ten Hag's future, a squad made up of individuals who don't seem to have the collective spirit necessary to have a good campaign across a 9-month spell. It's something that has had numerous YouTube videos and column inches dedicated to it, and I don't want to press that point home too much on this particular video. But from Crystal Palace's point of view, I have seen plenty of people saying to me, you got too carried away because you've beaten a very poor Manchester United side 4-0. And, I understand that from an outside point of view. But as I've said numerous times on my own podcast over the last week or so since that result, it was the first time that I think it's ever been the case in history that Crystal Palace, going into a game against Manchester United, whether it be at home, whether it be away, whether it be on a neutral venue, that we were favourites with the bookmakers to beat them. And we didn't just beat them, we took them apart on a Monday night under the floodlights in front of the Sky cameras. There was no debate about it. We absolutely peppered them. We could have had 5 or 6. Once again, we saw that trio of Michael Olise, Abir Eze and John-Philippe Mateta put them to the sword, but alongside a team who are just so well drilled and so well versed in what they are going to be doing from week to week, that it feels as though those foundations are as solid as they possibly could be going into the new season. You fast forward to the weekend just gone, we go to Wolverhampton Wanderers. Again, it's a Premier League game away from home. I'm not suggesting that Wolves are the all-powerful side that they were in the early point of the season. Undeniably, their season has fizzled out somewhat in recent weeks, but it's still their final home game of the campaign. There was a desire from Gary O'Neill and his players to really sign off with a bang, and we went there, we've scored 3 goals, we took a 2-0 lead thanks to a fantastic Michael Olise strike on, I believe, 26 or 27 minutes. A minute or so later, John-Philippe Mateta gets his 10th in 12 under Oliver Glasner. We ended up letting one in the midpoint of the second half. And, this isn't me trying to pour scorn on Roy Hodgson, but I couldn't help, from my vantage point in the away end on Saturday, but feel as though, had we conceded with a 2-0 lead away at Wolves under him, we would have retreated into our shells. We would have looked a little bit shell-shocked and as though we were hanging on for a point. But instead, we continued to play the way we do under Oliver Glasner. We got our rewards with a 3rd goal through Abir Eze, played in by Michael Olise, and he went round the goalkeeper, and we saw it out despite going down to 10 men. Now, for me, you talk about a new manager bounce. You cannot have a bounce if the first 6 games of a manager's reign in charge give you 1 win, and then the following 6 give you 5 from 6 and a draw. A new manager bounce, a honeymoon period, is surely the initial point. If you are going to go through 6 games with 1 win, you spend 3 weeks away on a training camp in Spain, you come back refreshed, and even then it doesn't quite click, and then all of a sudden it does. For me, that just highlights that this is coaching, this is an idea tactically that is going to work in the long term. People talk about the side getting blown up completely because Michael Olise has a release clause, because Mark Gay wants to leave. I think they are probably the most likely to go. There is still a small part of me that hopes that Michael Olise might might decide to give it one more year and try and help us push on into a European position. He clearly loves playing with Abire Eze. He has a genuine understanding with both Eze and Mateta at the moment, and the goals and results are coming because of it. But if you look at the overall side, the way that we're playing and the personnel at our disposal, I don't think it's cut and dried that this is just some sort of purple patch that is going to end when the 23-24 campaign comes to a close. The switch by Oliver Glasner to the 5 at the back system is one that I was a little bit wary of, and I dare say I wasn't alone in that from a Crystal Palace point of view when he first came in. I felt as though it might give us a little bit of trouble in terms of advancing up the pitch, that we might be too defensively minded. But the beauty, sort of twofold really, of the 5 at the back system is that both fullbacks can get forward with more freedom. You know, you've got Daniel Munoz, a player that came in during the January transfer window towards the back end of it. He has been an absolute revelation on the right-hand side of the pitch. He has boundless energy. He bombs up and down that right-hand flank and causes problems for opposition defences no end. You've got Michael Elise, of course, on that same side, and the two of them can really be a headache for any opposition defence. Tyreek Mitchell has improved leaps and bounds for me under Oliver Glasner's guidance, and with the central defensive trio, which, to be fair, has been missing Mark Gay from the start ever since Oliver Glasner came in, we just have that extra level of cover that is such a comfort blanket for every single fan watching from week to week. We have seen Joachim Andersen and Chris Richards perform fantastically in that central defensive trio, and the sight of Nathaniel Klein rolling back the years, you know, he said after the Liverpool victory 1-0 at Anfield that it was a position he'd never played in his entire professional career. He has taken to it like a duck to water. And I don't think that is mere coincidence. I think that is coaching, it's him understanding his role within the team, and indeed the overall side getting that, you know, it's something Chris Richards said himself, actually. If you look at the way that we play now with those 3 centre-backs, there is always one of them who is given the freedom when our side attack to go and join it, whether it is to step in and make a challenge, whether it's to create an overload in the middle of the park, or if you look, for example, at the second goal against Wolves at the weekend, John Felipe Mateta was of course there to tap it in after it rebounded off the post, but who had that shot? Nathaniel Klein. There is a centre-back in the penalty area with Crystal Palace on the break. Joachim Andersen plays the ball down the flank, Michael Elise teases his way into the box and plays a scoop pass, and who gets the initial shot off? Nathaniel Klein. That is not mere coincidence, that is a tactical choice, and it is one which is seeing us really cause opposition defensive problems, whether it be in the midfield or whether it be in the attacking third. Of course, the arrival of Adam Wharton has been absolutely massive for us. At 20 years old, he looks a genuine Rolls Royce. You know, I'm loath really to over-egg the pudding. There are plenty of people suggesting that he may well have a chance of going to the European Championships with England. He of course hasn't got a full cap yet, but his performances for Crystal Palace have been so eyebrow-raising that you wouldn't want to write it off. But next season we have the prospect of Chet Doucouré coming back into this side, who arguably, up until he was injured away at Luton in November, was the best player in our squad in terms of the stability that he offered at the base of the midfield. Those two together in the same midfield next season is an absolute dream on paper. And the fact is, you know, Mark Gay probably is on paper our best centre-back, but we have done this without him. He got injured against Brighton. That was towards the end of Roy Hodgson's reign. He decided to have surgery on the troublesome knee so that he could get back in good time, so that he could be part of England's squad for the European Championships. But I do not blame Oliver Glasner in the slightest for not starting him against Manchester United and not starting him against Wolves, because he doesn't want to break something that is not, doesn't want to fix something that is not broken. I think there was a little bit of frustration from Mark. He came on in the closing stages of the game at Wolves. He headed down the tunnel alongside the other players, but you know, a little bit in front of them whilst they lapped up the applause from the away end. But the overall picture for me is so bright, because you've got players like Will Hughes, like Nathaniel Klein, like Tyreek Mitchell that have taken their game to a new level. We have seen players we did not expect to be able to perform to the standards that they are, doing it week after week. The fitness levels are better, the patterns of play are better, the belief is better, and overall it just feels as though we finally have a manager that wants to try and win every single game he plays, but has them understanding the tactical ideology to such a way that I'm not suggesting no one can stop us. This isn't me suggesting that we're going to go on some sort of run towards European football. But in terms of the overall pattern of Crystal Palace, I do not believe this is new manager bounce. I do not believe this is a honeymoon period. I think it is something that is here to stay. And next season, regardless of the potential sales of Mark Gay and Michael Elise, which I'm going to be completely honest, are somewhat essential for us in terms of getting liquidity in the market and being able to spend across the summer window, I think we can still go from strength to strength with the Corey coming back, with Lerma there offering backup in the central midfield roles, with the defence that we now have, with Daniel Munoz bombing on down the right, Tyrick Mitchell on the left, Mateta in the form of his life and clearly as confident as he ever could be. There are so many positive things about Crystal Palace that I do not believe it to be a simple purple patch, and I wanted to record this video today to put more meat on the bone and sort of try and turn doubters into believers, really, from a neutral perspective, in case you have just paid passing interest to Crystal Palace and think that it's just something you can bundle into one new manager bounce package, because it very much isn't that. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Hopefully, if this is the first time you've watched me, you consider giving the video a like and pushing subscribe, because every single person makes a massive difference to me in growing this as a project. You know, the more I can grow it, you know, the better the content can get and the more embedded I will feel within the YouTube space as such. You know, I'm someone who predominantly has spent their time on social media with Twitter or with the podcast on Patreon over the last 10 or so years, but I'm trying to, you know, move myself into this YouTube space more and more. So if you have enjoyed it, please do consider interacting with it, liking it, pushing subscribe, and maybe giving it a share on your own social channels. But other than that, I will sign off there for today and look forward to speaking to you again soon. Cheers.